Hello, Internet. My name's KB Shinn. Welcome to Wonderlust. Since this is our first episode, I thought we'd start things off with a bang. Somewhere between running from saber-toothed tigers and putting a robot on Mars, humans discovered that having sex is a lot of fun. Sure, we desire love, safety, and companionship, but sometimes we just want to get laid. Desperately. As a species, we resolved to have sex as much as possible, even if doing so means giving up meaningful relationships, sleep, or just our HBO Go passwords. There's no shortage of famous people throughout history who went through some astonishing lengths to have the kind of sex that they wanted, or in some cases, not. That's a funny story in and of itself, so here are 5 historical figures with crazy sex scandals. Number 1 is Valeria Messalina. If you went back in time to one of Caligula's infamous crazy sex parties, you'd probably see her hanging out there. Valeria Messalina was the 3rd wife of Emperor Claudius, who rose to power in 41 AD when Caligula's crazy sex and murder train came to an end, permanently. She was the classic high school mean girl if said mean girl used her beauty and sexuality as a means of banishing and executing her enemies, but what she's best known for is being a crazy sex party train all by herself. Messalina frequently snuck out of the palace at night disguised as a prostitute so she could hook up with anybody that she wanted. She's rumored to have challenged an actual local prostitute to an all-night sexathon where they would each get a point for every man that they slept with. The prostitute gave up at dawn because she was too exhausted, but Messalina kept going and going, like a horny Energizer bunny. But God help you if you didn't want to hook up. One of the guys who rejected her advances was Appius Silenus, the governor of eastern Spain, who just so happened to be her stepdad. So to retaliate, she wrote all about him in her burn book, then made photocopies of the pages and passed them out all over school. Just kidding. Actually, she convinced her husband that both she and a really good friend of his had both had the same vision that Silenus was going to assassinate him. And since Emperor Claudius was a big believer in visions and the sixth sense, he took that hot tip and had Silenus executed. But all of Messalina's plotting, scheming, and unconscionable boning eventually caught up with her when she herself was executed in 48 AD. Okay, far be it from me to slut shame another woman, but damn girl, you need a hobby. I'd recommend crocheting. You're less likely to get into trouble with it, and there's exactly 0 chance that it'll give you syphilis. Number 2 is JeanJacques Rousseau. If that name sounds only vaguely familiar, it's probably because you fell asleep in your philosophy class. Psst, me too. Rousseau was an 18th century writer, composer, and philosopher. His ideas not only inspired the Enlightenment era and the French Revolution, but he's considered one of the founding fathers of modern political thought. His work, The Social Construct, was the biggest inspiration in the drafting of the Declaration of Independence, and his quotes are so elegant that they survive to this day as memes. But history reveals that Rousseau had a bit of a wild side. See, he really enjoyed being spanked. He discovered his kink as a young boy when he was spanked by his adopted mother and his nanny.
Dr. Freud, you have a phone call on line 1. Dr. Freud, line 1.
What's really crazy about this whole story is that this wasn't a leaked secret used to ruin his reputation. Rousseau himself admitted to having this fetish in his autobiography, which is readily available at any library. His logic behind his transparency seemed to be, I will not allow anyone to embarrass me for my kinks. So instead, I choose to out myself as being a naughty boy. Which is funny because Rousseau's love of the booty smack wasn't exactly a secret before he wrote it down. Part of how he got his jollies was by pulling his pants down and then running at random women in the hopes that they would give him a good smack. I mean, just imagine that you're out shopping, swinging your bag, minding your own business, when all of a sudden this pale white ass just comes barreling towards you, like,
let me see. I need some eggs, some carrots, some potatoes. Oh, the moon looks unusually bright today. Wait, that is no moon?
I think that's right around the time when I would start carrying a brick in my purse. Number 3 is Lord Byron. Pretty much everyone in the English-speaking world has read at least one of his poems, even if they didn't know it. He's pretty much exactly what you might picture whenever you hear the word poet. All he'd need to blend it into today's art scene is bongos and a silly hat. He was handsome, charming, incredibly talented, and carried the psychological scars of a deeply childhood. In spite of, or perhaps because of this baggage, Byron still partied like it's 1999. His sexcapades were so prolific that scholars still talk about them to this day. Saying that Byron got around is kind of like saying the sky is blue. If you had an ancestor living in England in the early 1800s, they probably had sex with Lord Byron. But one of his most infamous affairs was with Lady Caroline Lamb, when they were both married to different people. They never tried to hide that they were seeing each other, and would sometimes show up to parties as each other's dates, which is something that just wasn't done at the time. People eventually stopped inviting them both to the same parties because it was weird, and if Byron ever got invited to a party that Caroline didn't, she would often sit outside and wait for him, sometimes for hours, even if it was raining. She did everything in her power to try and get his attention, even plotting to leave her husband and sending Byron a bloody lock of her pubic hair. Yeah. The relationship was passionate and highly toxic, and it ended badly, with neither one of them being over the other person. But Caroline was just one of the more notable lovers. Byron was a good boyfriend in the same way that Darth Vader was Father of the Year. His affairs tended to end with people losing their money, leaving town, vanishing from society in disgrace, seeking professional help, or even attempting suicide. Let me put it this way. If you drove anyone in your little black book to seek psychiatric care in the 1800s, you did bad. But people are complicated, and there was one woman that Byron actually loved. Augusta Lee, his half-sister. She was his best friend, and maybe the only person in the world who ever truly got him. They loved each other like crazy. So much, in fact, that it's believed that he fathered at least one of her 4 kids. Adultery and homosexuality were sort of fine, but incest was a bridge too far in polite society, and when word got out, he fled the country. And I'll be real honest, even knowing what I know about him as a person, yeah, I'd probably still tap that if he asked me to. That's the power of the Byron boner. Number 4 is Gandhi. Really, KB, did you have a stroke? Nope. Gandhi deserves special recognition. Gandhi preached celibacy to his followers. On the road to spiritual purity, sex was merely a distraction. Naturally, not everyone was on board with this idea. Some people, though, thought that it wasn't too high a price to pay for self-governance. And besides, just because you're on a diet doesn't mean you can't look at the menu, right? Right, but in his case, there was a whole lot of menu browsing going on. He took a vow of celibacy at age 37. I don't know how his wife felt about it, but I'm guessing she was surprised. But like anyone who finds themselves caught in a tightly binding contract of their own making, Gandhi looked for loopholes. He wasn't having sex, but he was still expressing sexual feelings, both through his writing and through having explicit conversations. And then there were the purity tests. Gandhi loved testing his self-control, and he did it constantly. He would have his young female followers do strip teases, perform lap dances, or take group baths together. He also habitually slept with naked young women. It was spun as a special honor, and all of his little Gandhi groupies would passively fight amongst themselves for the privilege of trying to seduce the Mahatma. This would be slightly less creepy if his favorite bedmates didn't include his great-grandson's wife and his 18-year-old great-niece. He's quoted as saying, "We both may be killed by the Muslims, and must put our purity to the ultimate test, so that we know that we are offering the purest of sacrifices. And we should now both start sleeping naked." You need some serious professional help after that. Vow of poverty be damned.
Hello, how can I help you?
Yeah, I'd like to make an appointment to speak with a therapist.
Which one, please?
All of them. Number 5 is Warren G. Harding. America's 29th president isn't remembered for a whole lot. He died halfway through his first term. He was responsible for the Teapot Gnome scandal. I'll let you Google that one. It involves oil reserves and bribery, so kind of like a modern president. Also kind of like a modern president, he pushed back on progressive reform and enacted a lot of racist immigration, racist laws championed by racists. Racistly. But beneath his grumpy bulldog exterior beat the heart of a poet. No, not quite. And the libido of a Kennedy. In 2014, the Library of Congress released a collection of letters that Harding had written to his longtime mistress, Carrie Fulton Phillips. But these letters weren't just sweet nothings written to a secret lover. These letters were smut, and they were glorious.
I love your poise of perfect thighs when they hold me in paradise. Do go on, Mr. President. I love the rose. Your garden grows, love's seashell pink, that over it glows. Feastin' and beastin', you dirty minx.
What? It's nothing. It's just some light reading. Shoot. These letters are now historical documents, right up there with the Declaration of Independence and the New Deal. God bless America. Harding's biggest scandal, at least in terms of scandals of the heart, was his affair with Nan Britton. Harding was more than twice her age, but she was madly in love with him. By Mr. standards, if you can call something that, she was fairly innocent. She gave him her virginity when she was about 20 years old. But once that milestone had been crossed, Nan found her wild side. They hooked up all over the White House, including on the Senate office couch and inside a coat closet. What's more, the Secret Service ran interference to make sure that they never got caught by the First Lady, Florence Harding. When Harding died suddenly in 1923, Nan found herself cut off both emotionally and financially, and with a young child to support. After a few years of struggling, she ended up publishing the first tell-all book in 1928 called The President's Daughter. As of this recording, adultery is still on the books as being a crime in 21 U.S. states, so in 1928, Nan would have been rolling the dice on whether or not she'd go to jail for telling her story. As is often the case during such scandals, the American public shredded her for it, forcing her to move all the way across the country to Oregon. Meanwhile, Harding himself had nothing to answer for because he was dead. DNA testing eventually confirmed that Elizabeth was indeed Harding's daughter, so perhaps now maybe Nan's descendants can feel somewhat vindicated. Indeed, this could be a lesson for all of us that people can be more than one thing. Oh, we also know from reading Harding's letters that he nicknamed his penis Jerry. Isn't history fun? Hey, if you like this video, be sure to like, share, and subscribe for more content. I think we can all have a lot of fun together. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.